Hello, this is Mr. Burke, and we are going to be reviewing the 6.6 Hormones, Homeostasis, and Reproduction subtopic of IB Biology. So this whole topic is it's a very all-inclusive topic about hormones in general and how they promote homeostasis. And then there's a whole section as well towards the end that focuses more on reproduction and how reproduction relates to hormones and homeostasis. So the essential idea here is that hormones are used when signals need to be widely distributed. Because that's the essential idea about hormones, is that they are released into the bloodstream, and they're released into the bloodstream in order to carry a signal to some other part of the body. An example of this would be thyroxine. It's produced by the thyroid gland. This is one of the hormones that you need to know about, and you need to know that it's produced by the thyroid gland. You don't really need to know the interaction that it has with the hypothalamus for the IB. However, it's worth noting that a lot of these hormones and organs that release the hormones are part of a larger system and a complex chain of other hormones that cause the production of other hormones, or possibly inhibit the production of other hormones. And so that's where we get into homeostasis. As always, make sure that you're looking at the understandings and the applications and skills before we begin, so that you can just have somewhat of an idea of some of the words that you're going to see and some of the concepts that you're going to see. Okay, so here's a slide just talking about how homeostasis, a review of homeostasis, and how homeostasis regulates processes in your body through negative feedback. What is negative feedback? Negative feedback is a way for a system to keep in balance and control or regulate something. So here's an example with body temperature, right? Our body does maintain or try to maintain a constant body temperature. How does it do that? Well, one of the ways is if the body temperature rises, the blood vessels are actually going to dilate, resulting in heat loss to the environment, and sweat glands also do secrete fluid, right? You're sweating when you sweat. And as the fluid evaporates through evaporative cooling, heat is lost from the body, and then heat is lost to the environment, and the body temperature does decrease and maintain that constant temperature. If the body temperature falls, something that happens is your blood vessels are going to contract, and that's actually going to retain heat. Another thing that your body does is it will shiver, right, to increase friction and involuntary contraction of the muscles to generate heat. Right? That's going to help to warm up your body through the friction, and heat is retained in the body, and your body temperature is going to rise back to that baseline level that you want. So again, it's worth noting that most hormones do help our body to maintain homeostasis, maintain that balance in our body. And usually they're working through mechanisms of negative feedback in order to do that. So for this topic, you need to know about these different organs and these different hormones that they produce. You've got your pancreas over here, which is going to be producing insulin and glucagon. That's going to help to regulate what? Your blood glucose levels, right? You've got your thyroid over here. It's a butterfly-shaped gland, and it produces thyroxine. That's what I was talking about earlier. That's going to help to control metabolism in your body. And it's really the target cells there for thyroxine are going to be all of the cells in your body, because metabolism is a really general term, right, for just all of the chemical reactions that happen in your body. So where are all of the chemical reactions happening in your body? In all of your body cells, right? Okay. The target cells for insulin and glucagon, and when I say target cells, I mean where are the cells that the message from the hormone is going to be transmitted to. So the target cells for insulin and glucagon are going to be your muscle cells, your fat cells, and your liver cells, and we're going to talk more about that later. Okay, then you've also got your adipose tissue, that's producing and secreting leptin. Leptin actually helps to control appetite, and it works on targeting your hypothalamus, which is involved with appetite regulation. This organ that we're going to be talking about is the pineal gland, right? That's going to be producing melatonin. So maybe you've heard about taking melatonin for jet lag, right? The symptoms of jet lag, because it helps, melatonin is released in darkness, and it helps to regulate your sleep cycles and your circadian rhythms and biological clocks. Okay, you've got your testes, that's producing testosterone, and the testosterone is going to have several different functions, but mainly to help develop the male sexual organs and to produce sperm. You've got your ovaries and placenta that are producing estrogen and progesterone. And so those hormones are involved with the development of the female sexual reproductive organs and also involved with the menstrual cycle and pregnancy. Then you've also got your pituitary gland, which produces FSH and LH, and that's up here, your pituitary, right over here, producing FSH and LH, which is again involved with the menstrual cycle and pregnancy. This is sort of the bigger picture idea of all of this, of how hormones work, right? So remember we were saying that hormones are released to send messages or signals to other cells. So how do they do that, right? Well, they are produced in specialized cells of an organ or tissue and then released into the bloodstream to affect the target cells, okay? And usually this is in order to maintain homeostasis. So here's an image of a cell that would be producing the hormone, right? That hormone is released into the bloodstream. Here's a blood vessel carrying blood. It's released in the bloodstream. Okay, the hormones are going to be traveling through the bloodstream in order to reach this target cell that it's acting on or sending the signal to. Okay, they are produced by those specialized cells in response to some kind of a stimulus. So there's a stimulus that's causing that to happen, and generally the stimulus would be something that we're trying to inhibit or regulate. Okay, the specialized cells are monitoring those levels of molecules that they're trying to control or regulate, as I was saying before. And then the target cells over here, again, are those cells that we're trying to target with the hormones, right, in order to regulate those initial molecules that were being monitored by this specialized cell that produces the hormones. Here we've got the endocrine system. The endocrine system is involved with most of the tissues that you need to know, the organs that you need to know that secrete those hormones. And there is an additional tissue, adipose tissue, that's not on this list, that secretes leptin, which you need to know about. Okay, so you've got your pineal gland up here in the brain, and that's going to be producing melatonin. You've got your pituitary gland over here, which you do need to know about. That's going to be producing FSH and LH. You've got your thyroid gland over here, the butterfly-shaped gland producing thyroxine. You've got your pancreas producing insulin and glucagon over here. You've got your ovaries over here producing estrogen and progesterone, and then you have finally your testes over here producing testosterone. And leptin is produced by the adipose tissue or your fat cells. Okay, so here we're focused on the pancreas. The pancreas contains beta cells and alpha cells that are going to be producing insulin if it's beta cells and glucagon if it's the alpha cells. And the whole goal of this, of secreting these hormones of insulin and glucagon, is to control blood glucose levels. This is also known as glucoregulation. Okay, so how does this work? Well, if the blood glucose levels are very high due to maybe you just ate some sugary snack or just food in general that has glucose in it, and your blood glucose levels increase, right? So a lot of glucose in your blood that's being transported to your different tissues, but it's too high. We don't actually want really high levels of blood glucose all the time. It can have negative effects on your arteries. Okay, so we want to reduce those blood glucose levels, the high blood glucose levels. We're going to, if the blood glucose levels are higher in the pancreas, your beta cells are going to be secreting insulin. Insulin is a hormone that gets released into the bloodstream, okay, just like all hormones, and it's traveling to these target cells over here, your liver and fat cells. It's also going to be targeting your muscle cells, though. We'll talk about that in a second. The liver and fat cells, though, they're going to respond. Their receptors are detecting the insulin that was produced by the beta cells, and they're responding by lowering blood glucose levels by taking glucose and storing it as glycogen. So glycogen is basically a bunch of glucose molecules all linked together, and it's a solid that's going to be not soluble in the blood. And it's just going to be stored, right, as glycogen, stored for why? For later use, right? And then your muscle cells are also just going to be reacting to the insulin by allowing glucose to enter the muscle cells so that the muscle cells can use the glucose. And that's also going to help to reduce and lower the blood glucose levels. Now, if we have the opposite, where we have low blood glucose levels, then essentially the opposite is happening. We need to increase blood glucose levels. Why would we need to increase blood glucose levels? Well, you do need glucose. All of your cells and tissues need glucose. For what? For energy, for cellular respiration, right? To produce ATP energy. So if there's low blood glucose levels, right, then your pancreas, which is monitoring it with its beta and alpha cells, monitoring the blood glucose levels, the alpha cells are going to notice or be able to monitor that there are low blood glucose levels. It's going to then secrete glucagon into the bloodstream. Glucagon gets secreted into the bloodstream, and its target cells are the same target cells for insulin, but it's going to have the opposite effect. So the liver and fat cells are going to detect, with their receptors, detect the glucagon. That then triggers the glycogen to be released as glucose. The glycogen gets broken down into glucose, and that increases the blood glucose levels. I would encourage you to look at this chart and fill it out for normal regulation of high blood glucose levels and explain, what do these B cells do with glucoregulation? What do the beta cells do? What do the alpha cells do with glucoregulation? What are the target cells involved here that the hormones are going to be acting on? And what's going on with the receptors on those target cells, and then what happens as a result? Okay, so you do need to know about the causes and treatment of type 1 and type 2 diabetes. Diabetes is brought on by the inability for the body to properly glucoregulate or properly regulate the blood glucose levels. So how does this happen? Well, there's two different types of diabetes. Type 1 diabetes is where you don't have enough insulin being produced by those beta cells that we talked about on the pancreas. Why do we not have enough insulin being produced by those beta cells? Well, it's because the beta cells have been destroyed by some illness. It's an autoimmune disorder is what's popularly thought now about type 1 diabetes. This means that your own immune system, for whatever reason, is attacking its own healthy beta cells on the pancreas because it's recognizing those cells as being a pathogen. So what happens as a result of that? Well, you're not going to have enough insulin being produced when you have high blood glucose levels. If you don't have enough insulin being produced and released into your blood system, then what's going to happen? Well, there's not going to be enough of it to stimulate the target cells, which are the liver, fat, and muscle cells, to remove the high glucose levels and turn it into glycogen. So you're going to remain with high blood glucose levels. One treatment for this is to use insulin injections. So if your body's not producing enough insulin, then you can actually inject it into your body, and then you've still got these target cells that can respond to that. And that's why people with diabetes are going to be monitoring their blood glucose levels, because there's not enough of those beta cells to be monitoring their blood glucose levels in their body. So the person has to monitor the blood glucose levels on their own and then inject insulin, much like the beta cells would be, so that these target cells can reduce the blood glucose levels and turn the high blood glucose levels and turn that glucose into glycogen. Type 2 diabetes, which is thought to be a stronger hereditary relationship and usually does come on later in life, although it can happen earlier in life as well. And it is also related to obesity and poor diet. So if you are obese and have a poor diet and not exercising and taking care of your body properly, then it's more likely that you can have an onset of type 2 diabetes. So what is type 2 diabetes? In this case, you do have enough insulin being produced by the pancreas, by those beta cells, in response to the high blood glucose levels. However, when the insulin is released into the bloodstream and reaches the target cells, liver, fat, and muscle, the target cells cannot respond to the insulin. Why? Because their receptor cells there's not enough of them, right? So that's the issue with type 2 diabetes, is that there's just not enough of these receptor cells here. And again, that's due to genetic factors, heredity, but also related to health factors and poor diet. Noting that the end result of this is the same in both. It's that you cannot remove the glucose from the blood and turn it into glycogen, right? These target cells are not able to do that in both type 1 and type 2 diabetes. The treatment is going to be different, and the causes of both of them is going to be different as well. So for type 1, you're going to use insulin injections. For type 2, there are some therapeutic treatments to increase the number of receptor cells on those target cells, of receptors on the outside of the target cells. Actually, that would be detecting the insulin and turning the glucose into glycogen. So that's one treatment, a therapeutic to increase the receptors on the outside of those cells. And then another treatment would just be to properly take care of your body, eat healthy foods, and eat foods that are lower in sugars.